acknowledge that there are mighty beings out there in charge of these things, and let them know, hey, watch out, because we're bringing some heavy duty spiritual stuff your way, and we're going to use your equipment. So that's what we're doing today. And I really appreciate that you came on to hear what we have to say today. And I'll just introduce myself. I'm Hazel Archer-Ginsberg. Are we recording, Stefan?
Yes, we are.
Oh, very good. Okay, so here we are. It's official. And I'm the festivals coordinator of the Rudolf Steiner branch in Chicago. And I also serve on the Central Regional Council of the Anthroposophical Society. So, I'm also the founder of Reverse Ritual. This is understanding anthroposophy through the rhythms of the year. And I work as a transdenominational minister. So got my fingers in a lot of little places, really trying to honor the cycles of the season. And we are in a very interesting cycle right now, aren't we? And I'm really, truly just honored that you've chosen to join me at this Sacred Gateway. So I'm just gonna pull up this screen here. So, just to give you a little background here, when our recent world events compelled us to move this conference online, I really felt it was a call from the spiritual world to use this opportunity to explore with you what spiritual science has to say between the link between ourselves, those across the threshold, and the causes of epidemics on Earth. Yes, dear friends, spiritual science reveals that there is a connection. Now, let's see. There we go. So, in my personal biography, 4 years ago, I developed a really bad case of viral pneumonia. And interestingly enough, it was at the time of the last presidential election. Interesting coincidence, perhaps. And it really laid me up for quite a long time. And it really gave me this opportunity to, come to terms with this worry and fear that I had about the world situation. And then I really recognized how I was holding that in myself. And that perhaps that was part of the cause of my illness. And so while I was sort of laid up, I was able to do some really deep meditations and really picture the relationships in my life and try to bring healing on many different levels. So it really started my intensive spiritual research into this topic of karma and illness. And of course, in these last months, really digging into this idea of epidemics. And we have a lot of content today. Tomorrow we'll be able to spread out a little bit more and have more conversation and stuff. But I think it's interesting that today is actually Orthodox Holy Saturday. So those who follow the Holy Week know that Holy Saturday is the time of the harrowing of hell. So friends, get ready, because we're going to take a deep dive. So Dr. Steiner tells us, it is urgently necessary for humankind to become conscious of the fact that the so-called dead and the spiritual world are working into the actual details of physical existence. So we could just stop right there and think about that for quite a long time. All the things we see here in the physical world, that the so-called dead and the spiritual world are working with us to bring this about. A lot to think about. So spiritual science shows that continually flowing into the physical causes of illness are forces that come through human beings on both sides of the threshold. So today we are facing this illness, which under a microscope appears like the sun's corona. Well, that's a lot to talk about, and we will get into that a little bit, I often make art to help me to grasp some of these hidden mysteries behind world events. And I don't usually take the time to explain my little collages that I put together, but in this case, I really found living in me, especially at Eastertide, this ever-present picture of the earth becoming a sun. Yes, this ever-present picture of the earth becoming a sun, with this counter image of the coronavirus on the micro level and the etheric body of Mother Earth shrouded in a web of satellites on the macro level. So to deal with that, I began to visualize this being, the representative of humanity, which we all must strive to become. You know, this being called in to hold the balance, right? To foster the light divine. Right, so balance, I think, is an important thing to think about. You know, it's easy to see that our ecosystem is out of balance, right? We share the etheric realm with the plant world, and our astral body is affected by the imbalance in the animal world. We share this etheric world with the so-called dead as well. And this Steiner quote may give us a clue, because Steiner had a lot to say, in particular about bats, which some say are linked to this condition. So he says, the bat contributes an unhealthy astrality, consisting of unconscious, fear-laden ideas, feelings, and speculations, which feed beings who oppose the aims of the progressive hierarchies for the healthy evolution of human beings. So Steiner goes on to say that this bat residue is most craved for. It's a nutrient of what he's described as the dragon. But he says this bat residue must first be breathed into the human being. The dragon finds his surest foothold in human nature when man allows his unconscious instincts to be imbued with these emanations of the bat. There they seethe, and the dragon feeds on them and grows. So it's not a pretty picture, but it is a picture, a societal picture right now, I believe. So besides building our immunity through biodynamic foods, doing eurythmy, we have Raven here, Raven Garland, who will lead us in some eurythmy later, doing meditation, etc. We are constantly asked to consciously purify our astral body of these images of fear placed there by the dragon. And this also benefits the world of the dead, since they share this realm, this astral realm. And really, people, the only way that we can actually stop the spread of this illness, to stop it from mutating and returning again and again, is through a natural immunity. Of course, the frail, they must be protected. But by facing the challenge to our immune system, we face our karma. And this strengthens us. It strengthens our etheric body, our immune system. And our immune system is not just about heredity that's passed down from our ancestors. It also works out into the future. It is a will activity. It works by manifesting an illness, which gives us an opportunity to reform and renew our relationship with our ancestors, our relationship with the earth, and to our future evolution. Steiner says, illness seeks to create our body anew from out of sun forces arising in the present, but which are calling from the future. So could it be that the name corona is a clue to its cure? An admonition for us to reconnect to the sun forces of the etheric Christ, waiting to be employed in these current evolving conditions. An invitation to rise to a higher stage of initiation for humanity. We could think of it as a true coronation. Yeah? Let's flip that corona around and make it a crown for us, an opportunity for us. Perhaps this illness is part of a process. Can we see it as a learning curve, as a reset for humanity? Now, I saw this statement by a Hopi elder. I'm sure you've read plenty of things going on around all of this. And I see Susan is asking, what is the dragon? Well, that's a good question. And that's sort of a picture that we create in anthroposophy for these forces of destruction, which are needed for our evolution. So, but it's a matter of recognizing them and taming them so that we can truly not let them inhibit us in our purpose in becoming truly human. So a lot of things going on out there in the world, and this Hopi elder put this thing out. I just wanted to quote it here. This moment humanity's going through can be seen as a portal or as an abyss. The decision to fall into a hole or to go through a portal is up to you. Really is up to us. Yeah. Things can happen in the outside world, but it's our reactions. This is the point of evolution. So Steiner warns specifically that falling asleep with fear, hate, pictures of horror, materialistic mindsets provides a breeding ground for viruses in the materialistic mindsets. And it provides these individuals and in completely in the subconscious of society as a whole. So it's really, the way I think of it is that it is the fear in our astral bodies, which is really contagious. So how are we doing here? Everybody still, we're still here? We're still breathing? Okay. So we're going to go a little deeper. You ready? We're going to take it a step further to think about what Steiner says regarding human beings that haven't developed a moral conscience. Those that don't have a connection with the spiritual world. Steiner tells us that in the life between death and rebirth, because we know that we're not just here, but we also have another journey to go through, that if we don't have spiritual ideas, that we could become the slave, the servant of the dragon, of these beings who have to bring illness and early death into the world in their next life. Okay, I know that's intense. Let's look a little deeper into this. Spiritual science reveals that after death, these people that are bound to their sense world intellect, that are unable to take the higher vibrations of the spiritual world in, they become stuck in the lower realms just outside the physical world. Now, the Buddhists call them hungry ghosts, right? The Buddhists have ceremonies around working with them, and we'll talk about this tomorrow in our workshop, describing how destructive forces flow from them into the physical world. So Steiner also indicates that what he calls the dark brotherhoods, they know this and actually use these discarnate human souls as weapons in their goal of disrupting our true human evolution toward love and freedom. Steiner asks, why have these souls condemned themselves to such service? Because, he says, during their lives on earth, they indulged in love of ease and comfort. Steiner tells us that If we consider how widespread love of ease and comfort has become, we will find that Ahriman has a considerable number of Rick fruits. So Ahriman is another name of this dragon, comes from the ancient Persian epoch, and again has its place. So through spiritual science, we see that this evil, this idea of missing the mark, these obstacles that are put in our way, they have a purpose to help us in our striving. So these ideas they can be a little disconcerting, but it really points up our responsibility to counteract these forces by working with the dead, creating protective thoughts and ceremonies that help to release them through our healing intentions. And this work has the added benefit of preparing us to take on the task of redeeming evil, not just in ourselves, but in the world. So that's a lot to digest. So we're going to take a little pause. We're going to take a little breath, and I'm going to ask Ines to come forward and read these verses from Steiner that can help to give us a perspective before we continue. And you're all on mute except for Ines, and you can read along with her if you like. Ines, welcome.
Hi. I will follow the path that dissolves the elements into activity and leads me down to the Father who sends illness to work out karma, and leads me up to the Spirit who guides the erring soul toward freedom. The Christ leads downward and upward, creating spirit man in earth humanity in harmonious union.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So do we see that there's a reason behind these things? You know, it's hard to be in the middle of that, right? It's hard when you're going through an illness. It's hard to see, you know, why. But we can see that it does help us. It really does help us in the struggle to become truly human beings. So that was just a little breath, and we're gonna jump right back in. So during the First World War, at the outset of the Spanish flu epidemic, so they were using the word bacilli. This word virus hadn't been spoken of yet in modern science. So Steiner said at the time, the forces present in bacilli are a consequence of the Ahrimanic hosts of heaven having been cast down upon earth, of the dragon having been conquered. But the consequence of that victory in heaven is that the Ahrimanic way of thinking has been spreading across the earth since the end of the 1870s. We can therefore say that on the physical level, diseases involving bacilli, as well as present-day intellectual materialism, have the same source, which now seeks to thrive in the realm of the human being. In a higher sense, disease and materialism are most certainly comparable. So you see where we're going here? That there is this connection of not seeing the spirit behind matter, just being, you know, caught up in I got to see it to believe it, and this ability for these things to thrive. And it's interesting that he was talking here. So we're looking back at this First World War, which, again, you know, this is a topic of a whole nother lecture, but we can see this war as a counterforce to the new Michaelic age that was just trying to come in right at that time. And it was the first time that sub-nature was being harnessed in the form of cold, dead light This is electricity. So we can see a parallel in this escalation, through all the wars that followed. Military technologies, from sonar and hydrogen bombs to the rollout of 5G and other bioweapons, of which there has not been a full disclosure. A lot of questions. But perhaps we can see a connection with past epidemics, the rise in subnature, the coronavirus now, and this idea that some that work with spiritual science to know that there is this war of all against all that is to come in the future. Could this be a hastening? Can these destructive forces try to bring this energy in before its time? And there's also a connection here with this incarnation of this dragon, this Ahrimanic figure in the world, in the West. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, yeah, it seems like a very serious invitation to look at, the warlike conditions surrounding us today. So some of you may have heard this quote from Steiner. A lie is like a murder in the spiritual world. Well, he goes on to say, imagine a people which was composed entirely of liars. Not hard to imagine. The astral plane would be populated solely by the corresponding demons which these lies create. And these demons would be able to express themselves in a constitutional tendency toward epidemics. Thus, there is a certain species of bacilli who are the carriers of infectious diseases. These beings are the prodigy of the lies told by human beings. They are nothing else than physically embodied demons generated by lies. Yeah, thoughts are things, folks, and words have power. Pretty interesting. So, friends, when we're faced with these deep, sometimes shattering insights, we can really be grateful that anthroposophy exists. It's important to unite with other human beings, to grapple with these kinds of ideas. By virtue of, the possibility of sharing spiritual knowledge and wisdom with one another, a great deal is done for our life here and now, but also in the spiritual world between death and a new birth. So if you want to know more about these particular lectures, on the slides, which you'll be able to receive in the emails that you'll get when the recordings come out, you can look up that particular lecture, go on the archives, they're all up there. You can read the whole lecture for yourself. It's really, really important to do our own research into these things and not just hear them bit pieces. So, yeah. We're looking at the world now, and we're thinking about the world in the hereafter as well, how they're connected, and that's important to see. And Steiner really tells us that he calls it a holy mission laid upon humanity of the present, which informs the future. Right? I saw a little kid running around there at Enos's house. Right? This is the future, that we have to work with these divine spiritual beings who guide the world, and with the so-called dead. We're all one big community. We have to part that veil and realize that we have helpers. So we really must take up in earnest these kinds of spiritual conceptions, especially now, since more and more, common sense and clear thinking are, be honest, they're driven out by a profit motive and the parroting of a science built on materialism, which Steiner is very clear that these kinds of things are employed consciously in the case of the dark brotherhoods. as well, unfortunately, as unconsciously by people who, no fault of their own, are educated by a materialistic system. Steiner has a lot to say too around this idea of vaccines as well. So that's part of it. But I think we need Enos again. We need another breather after all of that. And let me just see if there's a, thank you for the quotes. Okay. Yeah, and Enos, somebody wants a copy of that. Yeah, this will all be, the slides will all be available. So you'll be able to have these beautiful prayers to work with. So this particular mantric saying by Steiner, is he gave it during the lectures for the physicians. So it's for the care of breathing, and it's supposed to generate warmth, and that this will help us to overcome this feeling of outer isolation through a spiritual connection with the world. So Enos, take it away.
In my heart, sun strength shines. In my soul, world warmth works. I will breathe the strength of the sun. I will feel the warmth of the world. Sun strength fills me. World warmth penetrates me.
Can you feel it? Yeah, even when we can't see the sun, we can know that this warmth is there for us. It's right there in our hearts. Yeah. So we're all gonna take a little break here, and Stefan is gonna lead us into our breakout rooms. I'm not sure, Stefan, do they need to accept to go in, or are they just put into the breakout rooms?
So you'll have to accept the room, and I'm going to unmute everyone before we go to our room, so it may get a little bit loud, but that way, once you're in the room, you'll definitely be unmuted, just in case you don't know how. And this will just take one moment. If there are any issues while you're in the breakout rooms, you can hit a little button down at the bottom that will alert me. It says ask for help, and I can come help you. And in the off chance that you do end up in a room just by yourself, I can help you get into another room. So no worries about that. So I'll unmute you all now, and we'll go to our rooms.
See you in 10 minutes.
What are we doing in our rooms?
Oh, I'm sorry, before you go, yeah. Hello. You know what? I just felt like maybe we should talk about some of our impressions of what's coming through from what we've received so far, or maybe you want to speak to where you're at with these thoughts, or I don't know, you'll be in your little karmic group and you'll see what. Those are my leading thoughts. What do you think? Is that good? Does that work? Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Stefan.
Yep.
Hello. Hi, welcome back. Hello. How are you? Hello. Come on in, folks. Were you all in groups of 3?
4.
You had 4?
Yeah.
Okay, good, good.
Yes.
The time goes by so quick, right?
Hazel, could I ask you one question
Sure.
quickly, a short one?
Of course.
When is your birthday?
My birthday?
Yes.
July 12th.
Oh, great.
Yeah. Yeah, as a matter of fact, I just had an astrosophy reading done by Martha Loving. And, you know, I had always thought I was a double Cancer and found out I was a double Gemini.
I
So
thought you were a Gemini.
a lot of thinking, right?
Yeah, you're
You know,
very
there's more than
Gemini.
one thing going on.
Hello, welcome back, everyone. Hi, Stefan. How's everything?
Everything's well.
Good. So I'm going to invite folks, if people want to say a couple words, maybe you want to spotlight me right now, Stefan, and whoever else wants to speak and maybe share what their group talked about. We'd love to hear a little tidbit from your conversation if you want to share with the big group. So just unmute yourself and Stefan will spotlight you. Of course, we want to remember everything, you know, that we talked about is confidential. And, you know, whenever we do a breakout session, you're always encouraged to continue the karmic connection. You can take down each other's contact information, et cetera, so you can continue your connection out, you know, after our workshop and everything. Did anyone want to share a couple thoughts from their breakout session?
I would say our group was, it was very thoughtful. I was so glad to hear what each person, how they were processing. We did share appreciation for how you're bringing a lot of these things that we've heard together and helping us get a better understanding.
Who's talking? I can't see you.
Oh, I'm Sandra. I'm sorry.
Can you spell like Sandra? Thank you. Good.
Yeah, lots of times it pops up when the speaker is talking. Anyway, but that this time is, I mean, and these.
Oh, Sandra just got muted.
Yeah, I think we're spotlighting someone else. Sorry about that. Just trying to. Stefan, can you unmute Sandra?
Okay.
Sorry
yeah.
about that technical. There you go.
That's fine. Maybe I needed to be quiet. But anyway, just that all of this that's going on is helping us be more conscious. I mean, we are isolated. We need to just really tune into the importance of our connecting with those on the other side and how we can help. What can we do here? So that, I think that was what I took from our talk.
Yeah. Any other little treasures from the karmic group before we go on?
Looks like Suzanne has her hand up.
Great.
Hi, y'all. Susan Ayas here from Berkeley, California. And my group did a few minutes of silent meditation to kind of gather ourselves. And when we came during this, I realized that I'm resisting this. I'm balking. It's hard for me to reconcile the suffering and pain. It's hard. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you. That's beautiful. Of course. Yes. Yeah. That's why I felt like it was important to let people know that maybe there was some spiritual thing behind it, so that maybe we could see this in a light like, okay, maybe there's something good that could come out of it. Yeah, but it is hard to be feeling that and feeling our friends and family members that are sick. Any other last thoughts?
Looks like Carrie.
Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to reiterate my great appreciation for all the beautiful images that you find, Hazel. I mean, there's so much that's so beautiful, and so you've just been so resourceful in finding those images and those wonderful quotes and verses. I'm grateful. And I was very struck by what I'm sort of aware is true, but had never seen, that image of the Earth surrounded with satellites. And that was heartbreaking to me. I just felt, I have no idea what all that is doing, but that didn't look like health.
Well, again, I think we're really, we don't necessarily get to see, what's going on. We see what's right in front of us a lot of times, and we don't see the bigger picture. And there are lots of companies wanting to put more and more and more and more and more. And so how can the challenge, I believe, is how can we reclaim the etheric world? How can we bring back this realm that is a resource for all of us? And where can we find the Christ there? That all of these things are trying to block us from the true vision of the Christ in the etheric. And that we need to just press forward and say, no, this is what's truly there. The rest of it is space junk, right? So yeah, I think it's important to bring these things to light so that we can say, hey, maybe that's not the reality we want.
I just wanted to say one quick thing I shared with my group that I had found on Facebook that I thought was really beautiful. It says, fear does not stop death, it stops life. And worrying does not take away tomorrow's troubles, it takes away today's peace.
Mm.
That's right.
It just came out of what you had said about fear and going to bed with fear, and that making you susceptible to illness. And so
Yeah, I think that's truly right. And I think an anthroposophical doctor friend mentioned that it's the astral body, the fear in the astral body, that's contagious. So yeah, not a good thing to take into our sleep. Thank you. That's a good quote to remember.
Can you say the quote again?
sure. Fear does not stop death, it stops life. And worrying does not take away tomorrow's troubles, it takes away today's peace.
Well, that was our slide for the breakout group, so I guess we can pass that one by. So, we ready to go on and see what else we can talk about? I think it's important to remember that the earth, as a living being, just like us, must someday go through a death and a resurrection, just as we do. That this is a natural cycle of all life. And as people striving to employ spiritual science, we know that all things have their season. And of course, we don't want to see people suffer, and we don't want this transition to happen before it's time. Especially before humanity is ready to truly take root in the spiritual world. Just like we don't want to see our friends, our family, anyone die prematurely. But things are so intricate and complicated. We can't always see all of the causes and effects of these things. That maybe, just maybe, these folks signed up in their life before they came into incarnation to go in this way. That they made a vow to release their unused etheric forces to be used for the good of all. That's one thing that Steiner talks about, that those who die before their time, before 72, are able to release those forces that they would have used for themselves, that they are made available in the etheric world for the good of all. And we also have to think about other things that spiritual science talks about, that sometimes a group of people decide in the spiritual world that they will die together on the earth and return again to the spiritual world together, that they have some sort of karmic connection that they're working out with in that way. So there's a lot of these factors here that we don't always see when we're faced with the face of physical reality. So I just wanted to bring that aspect up in it, because I feel like in our culture today, it really feels like there's a war on death, you know, and that really kind of gives way to this unquenchable desire to live really large, right, at the expense of others and the detriment, right, of our own soul life. So I've heard some young people say fake happy, right? So perhaps this fear of death is actually a fear of life. You know, how much life will we relinquish in order to acquire a sense of safety from death? So we come together at the sacred gateway to look death in the face, knowing that we have work to do at this threshold. So while we're here on earth, it is our task to build through spiritual ideas and concepts the wisdom that we need in order to have light on the other side. Otherwise, everything's dark. Steiner says, for what is acquired here as wisdom becomes light over there, spiritual light. Wisdom is spiritual light. In order that it may not be dark across the threshold, we need wisdom. So again, if people are not able to acquire spiritual concepts, they will have no light in the spiritual world. And without light, they cannot enter what needs illumination. Wisdom, which has been called by the name Sophia, is therefore necessary so that we may have light after death. We also need the capacity for love after death. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to develop a right relationship to the beings that are revealed through the light of wisdom. So Steiner says, yeah, we need love. Not the love dependent on the physical body. We can't take that into the spiritual world, but we can bring all the loving perceptions we've had. So what does that mean? Every time we marvel at a sunrise, right? That veneration, that awe, that wonder. Every time we look at a tree, the miracle of that. When we give care to an animal or unconditional love to another human being. When we consciously strive to revere the spirit in all life, we are not only making this life rich and beautiful, we're lighting the way across the threshold, adding rooms to our mansion in heaven, lighting lamps of love to warm the connection with our beloved dead. So this, my friends, is part of what we can understand through the Michaelmas festival. You can see on the bottom of the slide there, I put this little wheel of the year. And we can see that Michaelmas is right across from us now. You know, we're at the Eastertide. And so we have to always look up at these polarities. It gives us an insight if we look across and see what the opposite is. So Steiner plays the devil's advocate by saying, be careful what you love. If we pass through the portal of death, having loved power or wealth, debased our thinking by only following materialistic concepts or other sense-based things, then we must remain in the region of the earth as a destructive force. And then this love is applied to the work of destruction. These beings love the work of destruction. But the saving grace is that they are compelled to observe themselves in this false, misplaced love, which is really a lust, an enslavement. So here also in this lecture, Steiner discloses that in the future, a willingness to change must be followed up if the human race is not to experience, quote, continual hindrances. So really the good news again is that, standing side by side with us are those who have passed through the portal of death, and with our angel, they act as keepers of what is gained by us on earth as spiritual wisdom. So this protection coming from the other side is even stronger when we work together in groups. So let's, with all that we've said so far, let's just take a minute to let that imagination live in us as we consciously picture these helpful beings working with us, even now, as we bring forth these hard truths. I often find that my father, who was abusive in life, seems to be wanting to make up for it now that he's crossed the threshold. It's so interesting. I frequently sense his presence when doing healing work. How about you? Have you ever felt a presence from the spiritual world? I know Carrie has. Yeah. And I think that they're always trying to communicate with us, and it's about us trying to be open and receive. Steiner gives a lot of indications about how to be able to perceive what they want to give. A lot of times we think we wake up in the morning and we have a thought, we think, oh, we're so brilliant, this is my idea, when really it might have been inspired into us by a loved one. So it's always good to try to be awake to the inspirations we receive and the help as well. So that, having these kinds of thoughts really leads us to ask, what would it be like to consider that we can be thankful for the hard things in life? It's easy to be thankful for all the beauty and the good stuff, right? How can we be thankful for the obstacles, the things that really make us work? Maybe we can actually see a blessing in an illness. That sometimes sickness ends in healing because we've become strengthened in our inner life. And on the other hand, Steiner tells us that, quote, we can also be thankful to an illness that ends in death, because we know that the higher stage that we will enter in the life between death and a new birth is of great significance, because we will have learned that our body must be different when we construct it for the future, avoiding the harmful aspects which caused us to succumb before. So, on the one hand, the healing process develops our inner life processes. And on the other, death influences our development in the outer world. Life proceeds in such a way that we create abilities from our experiences. And the things that we can't assimilate are woven into the fabric, which we then make use of between death and a new birth. It is in sickness and healing that the complexities of human life become visible. Right? We're all trying to figure out, what is our karma? What is our destiny? These are the threads that we can, try to untangle. And again, Steiner tells us that if sickness and health did not exist, we would never be able to unfold the fruits of our own labor in the development of the world. For only by a knowledge of our mistakes can truth be arrived at. The human being learns to overcome mistakes and errors in healing on the one hand, and on the other, we meet the mistakes which we were not able to overcome in life, in the existence between death and a new life, so that we learn to overcome them in the next life. Yeah, it's hard to be patient. It's hard to learn everything right away, but we have to have trust that sickness brings birth to a renewed striving, that through illness we cultivate health on all levels. And epidemic illness can be seen as all evil, can be seen as prompts. All obstacles that arise here on earth are directed from the spiritual world. It's something that we prepared for ourselves. But Steiner makes it clear that there is a difference between whether a person has such experiences and is able to understand why, or whether they experience them unconsciously without realizing why they have to serve these spirits. So Steiner reveals, if the person knows why they are yoked to the spirits that bring epidemics about, they also realize that they must suffer from this illness themselves in the next life in order to work toward a cosmic compensation. If the soul remains ignorant of the reason, they create the same karma. The compensation can only occur in a later incarnation. Progress is postponed, not only for the individual, but this has repercussions for the whole of humanity, slowing the progress of our highest evolution. So things that we do affect others. We know that's true. And it's important that we learn whatever we have to learn. We're doing the learning here on Earth, but we will certainly experience the effects of what we've learned or didn't learn in our life after death. So yeah, we really do. We need Michaelic courage to stay awake to the implications of the current events. Being open-minded, staying positive, asking questions without judgment, opening to this opportunity. Yeah, seeing it as an opportunity, working consciously with our beloved dead and with the highest spiritual beings for the cause of human evolution. Which, by the way, certainly calls for us to push the reset button on the economic system, for one, right now. Yeah. It's a huge opportunity to come into a greater integrity with what Steiner calls the threefold social organism. My daughter and I were talking about the coronavirus and how it's affecting education. She's home from college, right? Affecting the arts in the cultural realm, which of course many people in the political and economic spheres say that the cultural realm is unnecessary to human survival. But many of you might have noticed that artists are giving away their art, giving free Zoom conferences or concerts and such. Art is important. It's part of our soul life. And it was certainly ravaged in Nazi Germany during World War II. We can't let that happen, And can we see that this pandemic actually helps us to see how essential the threefold social organism really is? Can this maybe be the reason we're having this? So people could say, hey, wait a second, everything's out of balance here, right? We need to reset things. That's my little pitch for the threefold social organism. Do we have any questions or anything before we go on? Kind of going fast, I know. Well, if not, I'm going to just dive in, take another deep dive. Stefano, are we good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So Steiner tells us that a being like Ahriman, who will incarnate in the West, prepares for this incarnation in advance. With a view to his incarnation on Earth, Ahriman guides certain forces in evolution in such a way that they may be of the greatest possible advantage to him. And evil would result were people to live on in a state of drowsy unawareness, unable to recognize certain phenomena in life as preparations for Ahriman's incarnation in the flesh. The right stand can only be taken by recognizing in one or another series of events the preparation that is being made by Ahriman for his earthly existence. And the time has now come for individual human beings to know what tendencies and events around them are machinations of Ahriman, helping him to prepare for his approaching incarnation. That's a lot to think about, but I think it's applicable here. So, friends, to make the adversarial forces work for our highest good, we have to recognize them. Name it for what it is, expose it, see them for what they are through their works in the world, before we can bring these forces into the light. The opportunity for the human being on both sides of the threshold to show up for one another right now it's huge. And the joy of both asking for as well as receiving support is everywhere that we turn. So before I ask Raven to come up for some eurythmy to close for today, I wondered if anybody had any questions or comments to make.
Hazel, it's Hazel.
Yeah.
It's Michelle. I'm on the phone, and I apologize. I was trying to figure out how to get unmuted after the breakout, but what I had shared with my small group is that 20 minutes before the start of our conference, my internet went out, and I feel like this whole past hour and a half, 2 hours has been an exercise on a microcosmic level of just paying attention to how to meet that reaction that would start to come up in me. And, like the frustration of having to be on the phone and recognizing I can't see, but then turning that into, but what can I do? And it's sort of like this whole time I've been increasing and focusing more of my ability of just being with people and knowing that I couldn't see the slides and I couldn't see people. So during the course, though, of our time together, AT&T first had said the internet they would not be able to fix it until Monday, and they sent a text with a link that it's now up and running. So I'll be able to be in the conference on camera for the rest of the time. So I just feel like on a very personal level, I have had, knowing that I was coming into this session too, it feels like I brought this microcosmic lesson for myself to understand how to move in balance and how to keep finding what can I do? What can I do to move forward in the face of balancing the knowledge that I'm dealing with these forces? So thank you so much for all that you bring forward, and I look forward to actually seeing the slides when we get them.
Great, thank you. Thank you. Anyone else want to share?
Hazel, it's Nicholas.
Hi, Nicholas.
It seems to me that Corona is a social disease. It's affecting the whole world socially. And the effects now seem to be much more intense or potent on a social level than they are actually on a physical level, considering the number of deaths are actually very, very minor compared to the deaths that are happening every day in other ways. But socially, we're seeing something very strong. So this goes back to, I think, what you're speaking of as the Luciferic and Harmonic forces as they have come in, and how Ahriman has prepared the way and how we have seen this. And I think socially, in so many ways, it has been incredibly well organized. And yet, to much of our surprise, it's actually being confronted in certain ways politically that we may have never expected. Otherwise, what we are seeing is a rampant amount of deception or lies that are actually coming over the mainstream media. And so when I think of that, if one can be so bold as to call them that, that is really reflecting on what Steiner spoke of as feeding back into this epidemic and into these harmonic forces that you identified in the beginning.
Thank you. I couldn't agree more. I think the saying social unity is really an important thing to keep in mind. How can we bring back this idea of social unity as opposed to social distancing? Yeah. Anyone else have any thoughts?
I have a thought from actually the breakout group, and with the social unity. I got some new insight into bats, and we were talking about the virus, being an imbalance of the astral forces, and yet bats have this sense of echolocation, elocution and echolocation, interesting. And the idea was presented that, maybe that is something that we as human beings can develop to, we were talking about communicating with the spiritual world, but also to communicate with each other as we're so isolated, and it's just a concept I'm working with. So the idea of echolocation, finding each other and finding the spiritual world and finding the spirit in each other.
Beautiful. Perfect. Right. We have to develop new capacities now, don't we? That's the opportunity. Mm-hmm. Good. One last thought or comment?
I have one.
Yeah.
I was thinking about last night how it feels so refreshing with this, as some people mentioned, what feels like a barrage of quote unquote information coming at us all the time from all angles. How, in a way, how I feel a sense of relief when I go into just that communication with the spiritual world and like deeper listening. And it feels to me as if the instructions, so to speak, that come through are so simple sometimes, so simple and not difficult and not complicated. And so I feel really grateful that we always have access to that if we make the time and get quiet, and maybe even find a time of the day where that for me, for example, it's best in the mornings. And just to real briefly share some interesting thoughts around this illness and healing, which was what you had started out with. You know, my son that you just, saw go past real quick when I was reading that verse, he was very sick at the end of January. So there are moments where I've wondered, or I thought, well, I wonder if he already had that virus or if it was something different. But he got very sick. I called it a respiratory flu at the time. That's what I figured it might have been. And he had very high fevers for a few days and missed school for a whole week. And I was there with him for the whole process of it. And it was the first time that he had something that seemed like an infectious illness, where he really was able to participate consciously in this healing, because when he has high fevers, he hallucinates, I guess you could call it. He has experiences and visions, and they're not always comfortable. But I was there with him the whole time, and he got to a point even where he would be able to open his eyes and say, "Here comes one," and I would be able to talk him through it and just say, this is good. Your body is healing. And I felt a deep acceptance in him during that time. And he came out very strong on the other side, And when the quarantine first started, I started feeling, I was congested in my chest. And when I would take a shower, I sometimes wondered, I said, what is this? It almost feels like a pain in my heart. That really felt more like a pain in my heart. And I had trouble clearing that up until during one of my meditations, I got a very clear picture of using dandelion oil on my heart at night and just falling asleep with this dandelion oil and a hot water bottle directly on my heart. And interestingly enough, that congestion and the heart pain, or if you can call it heart pain, was cleared up within a couple of days. And it wasn't until we read that verse that was chosen for this session about the sun and the warmth that I just realized, how simple that was. The dandelions being these little flowers of the sun, being so imbued with these sun forces, and then just the warmth of the hot water bottle, and how much that did for me. And I'm still doing it now. So just passing that on. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So before we have Raven, I just want to leave you with an imagination in the hopes that it will inspire in you an after image. I believe that we do need to cultivate these after images. So if this does occur for you, you could journal it and bring it back to our session tomorrow if you like. So I'm asking you, what would it be like to cultivate the thought that all this upheaval, the plagues, the natural disasters that we are experiencing right now, are in spiritual reality the travails of the being of Mother Earth, striving to slough off outworn Maya, endeavoring to give birth to a new etheric body where the Christ in me holds sway. And that we are the midwives, rolling away the stone with the angels to open the way for a new dawning, a resurrection that requires fresh formative forces, which must first grow and flourish in the human heart, right? Hearts that are willing to have cosmic thoughts, warm hearts willing to stretch and shift and to be uncomfortable so that it can evolve that fifth chamber, a womb for love and wisdom, offered up in freedom. Friends, the origin of the word virus, actually, it means poison. But this needs to be heard homeopathically as the poison that becomes the medicine that makes whole. So to further this healing, I now invite Raven Garland, curative Eurythmist and friend, to lead us in whatever she has available for us today.
Thank you. Well, we don't have much time, so I've been sitting and listening, and so there's so much that I could offer through Eurythmy. But what I've come to is something very simple. And thank you for bringing the verse about the sun, because that's what I would like to bring. I have a slightly different translation, and it's just the one that I know, so I'm going to use that when we do it. You can stand for this, or you could even sit. The movement part is really simple, but what I want to especially emphasize is that while we're on the internet this way, that you really can take this into yourself and not get lost in the screen watching me. So I'm going to show you. The movements are just so simple. It's just expansion with your arms and contraction. So I'm going to stand, and hopefully you will be able to see me. Tell me if you can't. Oh, I can see myself. Okay. All right. So we're just going to open. Into my heart streams the power of the sun. Into my soul weaves the warmth of the world. I will to breathe the power of the sun. I will to feel the warmth of the world. Power of the sun fills me. Warmth of the world permeates me. The sun is in our hearts, which is the portal that can take us into expansion, and which can take that expansion right back into our hearts and through our hearts into the world that we share. You can use the translation that's in the notes from Hazel, or you can even just remember what this very simple movement of expansion and contraction can bring to you.
Raven, could we do it one more time?
We sure can.
Yeah, we have 5 minutes.
Into my heart streams the power of the sun. Into my soul weaves the warmth of the world. I will to breathe the power of the sun. I will to feel the warmth of the world. Power of the sun fills me. Warmth of the world permeates me. Hazel, I want to ask, will this just shut off when we're done, or will I get a warning before?
I'm not sure. Stefan, do you know?
How many minutes do we have left?
I believe we have 4 minutes.
We've got 4 minutes, and it won't stop until I leave.
Okay, great. All right, then I would like to bring something else. We spoke about the etheric world. There is one sound in Eurythmy that really can enliven the etheric around us. And that's the sound of L. It's a very water sound. And one thing in Eurythmy, that everything that you put there stays there. So even though my physical hands are changing where they are, everywhere they've been, it's still there. What you create is still there, invisibly. So let's just do some L's together. And again, you can do this sitting or you can stand. And it's both going into the earth. You can find the water of life, and that comes really up and opens out. So it's the sound L. It's in love, fluid, life, let, light. You can have a little L right at your heart. You can let it grow like a lily. You can let it expand into the eternal, and you can bring it back into your heart. So one more time, we'll do the verse. So we start in the open. Into my heart streams the power of the sun. Into my soul weaves the warmth of the world. I will to breathe the power of the sun. I will to feel the warmth of the world. Power of the sun pours into me. Warmth of the world permeates me. Hazel spoke about the after image. It's really nice after you do some eurythmy to just be still. And it may be very subtle, but you may feel some effects from the eurythmy.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Raven. Yes, and dear friends, tomorrow we will have more breakout sessions and more eurythmy. We'll have more opportunities to let Raven take us on these healing journeys in our bodies. So I will see you all in night school, and hopefully at our session tomorrow. I think that's just about it, unless anyone had anything else they'd like to say. We'll create those after images together. Go out and get some sunshine.
Thank you, Hazel.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Peace.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Stefan. Thank you so much.